So when you're transacting tokenized assets, you're not necessarily transacting the value of that asset necessarily. What you are controlling is its state, who actually owns that thing. So it's less about sending messages back and forth and more about making sure that the ownership of the asset, the state of the asset, is actually changed in that transaction. So again, when you look at compliance and control outside of a transaction, that causes a lot of friction. Because we're moving to this new world of tokenization, you're going to have to move compliance closer to the transaction, if not part of the transaction. When you're talking about tokenization specifically, there are rules of ownership that you have to abide by. It would really solve a problem if you could do all the compliance and control checks before a tokenized asset is actually transferred, meaning you can confirm the state of the asset and who the asset goes to, and all of that determines if the payment actually gets sent or not. So I think if there is a way to transfer ownership immediately, that's going to be a preferred outcome. And the third element of this, I want you to try to visualize something for me because I think it explains it really well. Let's say you've got a department store in the mall, right? There's CCTV cameras around everywhere. You could be someone who's unvetted, unverified. You can walk into this department store, steal a load of things, and then leave. And it's only later when the CCTV footage is pulled that you're now in trouble, right? Now, it's only at that point, there's like a delayed moment in time where you are recognized for, bad behavior. That's fine, but it's a bit antiquated and it leaves a lot to desire in terms of like efficiency, because there's a lot more efficient ways to do that. Now imagine if you go up to that same department store and before you go into the store, there's a guy at the door and he verifies who you are. He kind of vets you, makes sure that you're mentally stable, that you're not there to steal something, and then lets you in, right? This is the exact same thing as how compliance works right now. Compliance is kind of like a delayed process, but you could change that and have it part of the process of going into the shop, right? You don't even get into the shop without the compliance element. And that's why it's kind of silly to focus entirely on the rails of the system without acknowledging the prerequisite conditions to make that payment even happen on the rails in the first place. The payment won't reach the rails if it doesn't get through compliance and control. So the real bottleneck here isn't the big problems that XRP is solving, the Rails solutions are solving. No, it's what happens before that. You have no new financial system without compliance and control. This is where I think 2026 gets really interesting, because you're not looking for who has the fastest rails for the new financial system. And I don't believe the biggest opportunities lay there. I think the biggest opportunities lie in the infrastructure that determines who's allowed to make a payment. All of this compliance stuff that I've been talking about, right? I believe this is one of the opportunities to be involved in 2026. Now, I'm not actually here to try and make you believe me, because this is just the way things are going. We've had indications that the world is moving towards this programmable money side of things. Compliance and control would be part of that programming. So bringing compliance and control into the money rather than a separate process. This is stuff you can't really debate and argue with. I believe the real bottleneck in this new financial system is compliance and control. But I think there are assets that surround that bottleneck that are trying to unwind it to kind of free up that bottleneck that will see the highest asymmetrical opportunity in 2026. So in order to track that my thesis that we are moving in that direction of bringing compliance and control into money, to confirm that thesis or to validate that thesis, there are a series of things that I'm looking for that would validate this direction. I'm going to share them with you now. So the first confirmation we're really looking for is when people are making payments, specifically in even pilot situations, are some transactions getting blocked before the transaction actually takes place? So what we're saying is that if a transaction happens and it doesn't meet the AML or KYC requirements of compliance and control, if there are notifications that would say, we'll monitor it, we're going to check back on this later, that would indicate that we haven't installed programmable money. But if you start seeing language like enforced whitelists or something like only approved wallets can participate, this would show us, this would confirm to us that this direction is being moved into. That means they're putting the compliance first before the transaction can take place. So I'm actively tracking all of these confirmations and invalidations when we get to them all the time. I want to make sure that I know immediately when something has been confirmed or invalidated, because that can push me towards being more bullish for that opportunity or less bullish or more bearish, right? And this is the value of having confirmations and invalidations, because you can start to weight your confidence based on what's actually happening rather than what someone else is saying. The second confirmation we would be looking for is when the banks start to issue their policies as part of the code infrastructure of the way they operate. Right now, policies can be found in documentation. Like, these are the rules that we abide by. Here's a PDF of it. And part of that delayed process for actually doing the checks later on is so that a human can come in and have a look and see, did we follow the rules? Now, if policy is code and it's no longer on these PDFs, that means decisions are being made in a more automated, systematic way, which would also suggest that compliance is moving closer towards the money. And again, that would confirm the thesis. Now, the third confirmation is a little bit of a tangent, but it completely relates to what we're talking about. And it is in the whole world of ID. Because identification obviously plays a massive role in the compliance element of this. You know, checking who are you, who am I in a transaction is obviously really part of this. Now, as I said about the fragmentation, if we don't solve this bottleneck, each part of the step will require its own new, fresh ID kind of presentation.